I'm Biggest Mike with Interstellar here for Interstellar Takeoff, and today we have a very special guest. So why don't you go on ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Steven Santoli. I've won a few YCSs in 2023, and then I've had consistent tops since then. I just got my 10th top at YCS Anaheim, and then I'm also a fan of the rogue decks or rogue strategies. So if you're someone who enjoys the unconventional stuff, then you'll probably see me as well.
All right. So we brought you on to ask you a couple of questions. So let's start off with the most basic one. What got you into Yu-Gi-Oh to start with?
Well, I guess right, everyone kind of starts off the same way in the sense that they're a little kid and they get packs randomly at the card shop, and they, whether they play the game correctly or not, with those cards is a different story. But even when I was in elementary school, and then when I was in grade 9, someone at my high school asked me, hey, let's go down to locals. There's a card shop downtown, and so I go downtown with my jank deck of Vinland beaters and whatnot. I get fully destroyed. And so after that, I actually go and try to build a functioning deck, and since then I just stuck with it. So it's just locals for a few years, and I started going to regionals more, then I started going for more events, YCSs, and etc. And then we got to the point where I'm at now.
All right. So everyone has that first deck that they first put together as a kid, but what would you consider to be your first real deck that you ever brought to a locals?
The first real deck I made was a Hero Beat, so I started way back in 2011, which was a while
Mhm.
ago. Uh, so it was, the Gemini Spark Hero Beat deck with Miracle Fusions. That was the first real deck. The first deck I had success with at locals was TG Stun, which again is just 2011. So those two, whether you want to consider, it wasn't, the Hero Beat deck was still kind of janky, but it was at least close enough to what the meta version was. And then TG Stun was the first deck I actually had any form of success with, even at just a local level.
Mhm. Continuing on with that, obviously you've improved yourself a lot since you first started playing. Over all of the years, what would you say would be the biggest thing that you felt helped you improve?
I think that the biggest thing that helped me improve is just, I think, gaining confidence in some sense and just understanding the process altogether. This is somewhat of an ambiguous answer, but there's no real, you know, solution where it's just, oh, you figure out how to do this and then suddenly you're massively better. Like improvement can take part and can occur in a bunch of different ways. Like there's a bunch of things to always improve on no matter what level you're at. And I think that large amount of my improvement was just kind of getting that first top and then seeing what type of player I am in terms of deck choice, understanding how to evaluate my deck list and my technical play better. So it's having some spice in terms of deck building because that's what I like to do, but not going overboard. And then understanding that how to look back and reflect on technical play and look at some of these games that maybe in the past I look at and go, oh, I got lucky, but they're actually winnable. And I think that the biggest thing is just focusing on technical play, and just you know not worrying about what your deck list is, not worrying about what you could have drawn differently. It's just in a given scenario, how could you play something better? Because the game is massively complicated. And I think people really remove that element of things. They blame luck or they blame deck list or they try to focus on other things. Where you really want to focus on how to get the most out of every single scenario, even if the game's unwinnable. Because that's how you win. Like if you have an unwinnable game, but you keep playing and forces your opponent to misplay, um, you can take wins like that. And I think understanding that and just learning how to maximize, not say maximize tech play in the sense of playing perfect, but maximize how to look at the game and just understand of okay, this is what I need to do to try to force out a misplay, or this is you know how to beat these unwinnable scenarios.
Mhm.
Is what I think kind of separates being able to talk consistently or not.
Yeah, I definitely think that something that people tend to do is only focus on their losses when they need to look at both their wins and their losses. I think that a lot of time people are quick to write off a game immediately as unwinnable, when if they take another look at it about like 3 steps back, they'll figure out the solution there. Do you think that sounds about right?
Yes, and I think that people often get into very routine plays, and you need to understand how to deviate from that. And so
Oh yeah.
understanding when not to push or when to do nothing. I think that a lot of people have a problem with doing nothing and just passing, and understanding that, okay, maybe there's a scenario where if I push, I get punished. And so, for example, example, like a starter, like one of my Raizeol starters, I summon some ice, get X grab, throw, now I fall. And knowing that, maybe in this situation I shouldn't, after my duo gets imperm, I shouldn't push into a nib because I have all these deck cards or stuff like that. And people just get into these routines where they just do the same thing over and over again. And it's the odds that, this is the 2% time where you're just passing on a duo for whatever reason, or passing on dead. I'm not pushing further, or understand that, like, hey, I'm going to slam down on Typhon in the middle of my combo because the Typhon actually clears a large amount of the board. And if my opponent doesn't have exactly another started, and I can get in a much more favorable position. I think a Typhon's another card that's like misused a lot when they don't push enough, or like I said, the combos just going through routine combos instead of knowing when to deviate for less.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with all of that. But earlier you mentioned that you tend to enjoy rogue decks, so I have to imagine that in some formats past, you might have felt a tad bit defeated or might have been going through a slump. What would you say were the key factors that helped you kind of dig yourself out of it?
I mean, that's just me in Snake Eyes format. In the sense that I won before Snake Eyes came out. It was like I won Indy, and then I got top 8 at Richmond at YCS's, and then I topped 4 Costa Rica with Snake Eye. After that, I didn't top right until the end when Raizeol came out, and not having much success in those events. But I think at that point, I kind of already had gone through earlier, declines in success, even when I wasn't having large success, even like when I was just playing at regional level. I think the big thing to understand is that, one, there's going to be variance sprees where you get unlucky, and you just have to accept these things. And the second thing is that your gameplay isn't constant. It's going to be a reflection of how much time you put in, or how much the meta is good for you. Like if you're choosing to play the best deck, or I have very high tier deck, you're gonna have better results than if you're playing something low. And you just need to not go in expecting the utmost of every single event and have realistic goals. And so if you're going into every event going, I want to win it, that's a very nice goal, but that's how you get yourself defeated as well. And so if you're going into an event where you haven't practiced much, then your goal can just be to top, or if you get an invite. Even me now, like, with winning YCS isn't top much. I still go to regionals, and if I finish X2 and think I played well, I'm happy with that because maybe I didn't put the time in. Maybe I'm playing a spicy deck, and there's some room for improvement in the list. And it's just not focusing too much on the results that you get. It's more about focusing on one, your gameplay, and then just what was your result with respect to your prep work. Because if your prep work was worse for whatever reason, maybe intentionally, because you just don't have time for it, then you can still take some happiness from doing subpar. But at least given how much you put in, it's still a result you can be happy with.
One thing that I've noticed with coaching some of my players is that a lot of them will put hours upon hours into testing, and then they'll kind of just end up plateauing. So, what do you think is the difference between testing and meaningful testing?
I mean, I think there's, I guess there's two types of things where you want to be doing. So eh, you don't want to be going away frustrated from it, otherwise you're not learning anything. Um, so when you're doing, I guess there'd be technically three types of testing in the sense that there's poor testing, and then there's meaningful testing. So testing can just be getting reps in. You go locals, you play locals. There's nothing spectacular happening. You're not learning any new strategies, but you're just getting reps in. And I think that's fine in general. That's good to have. The meaningful testing would be like when you're actually focusing on learning new things and you're really trying to delve into the game. And this is when you're putting aside with a relaxed mental state, and being able to critically analyze absolutely everything. And that's obviously, again, the same as locals testing, where if you have locals testing, then you're just going to go and maybe play games and not fully analyze, and that still can be fine. You're still getting reps in. But what the meaningful testing is, you're really wanting to go and critically analyze everything. You're analyzing deck choice. You're analyzing the way you're going into a matchup and trying to figure out how it works. So if you're losing the D barrier when playing Raizeol, it's like, okay, is this just a variance thing, or is there anything else I could have done differently in terms of my tech choices, my tech lineup? And the thing you want to avoid is bad testing, in the sense of you're getting frustrated, you're playing to win, and you just feel that you're making decisions without really thinking them through at all. And I think this is the big thing you want to avoid. You're not going to have every single testing session be super meaningful and be super productive, and that's fine. You just want to minimize the amount of bad testing you have, and then of the average testing, which would be not vast majority of what you do, you want to get as much good things from it as possible.
All right. Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. There's just so much that can be done with testing that you just end up either coming away from it happy and fulfilled, or you just end up feeling like you just wasted a couple of hours. So I feel like it's good for people to know what the difference between that is.
I think the one big thing as well is they need to not look at results as well, because if you're testing with people of equal skill and you're having like 50-50 results or even like 60-40 results or like
Hmm.
46x in this case, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like you can go to an event and do perfectly well with those types of things. Like what happens in testing is not necessarily going to replicate in the event. And I tell a lot of people that test with me, I'm like, if I'm beating you a significant amount, like that does not have any reflection on how you're going to do in the event. Like you could be getting smoked by me in testing and still go to an event and do well because the average player may not have the same meta reads we have that far in depth, or they may just have worse technical play to some degree, which the average player probably does. And so it's important not to get demotivated and understand what your strengths are. And if you feel comfortable and you feel like you're playing well in testing, even if it's not going well, you should be somewhat happy with that.
Hmm. Uh, let's turn to some recent things within the Yu-Gi-Oh scene. You mentioned earlier your extreme love of the Snake Eyes deck. Uh, so do you
Yeah.
feel that the OSS ban was necessary?
Some hit of this capacity was needed. Do I agree with it being OSS? Not particularly. I think Rescue Ace is a very cool deck. I think it's healthy. And so, like, when you look at these decks, what are healthy decks? And you want something that has interesting play patterns. And so, if you look at Snake Eye, it's Ghost Starter, Hand Trap. And these types of games aren't enjoyable. And of course, I am oversimplifying a lot. I think there's a lot of depth to the Snake Eye deck and to the mirror matches. But the percentage of games that kind of end with that back and forth hand traps are uninteresting. It's too high and it's uninteresting.
Mm.
So I'm happy it's gone that way. But I think Race isn't a deck that has that play style. Like they play usually around 12 to 15 tech cards and like their 4 or 5 card deck, and sometimes they're on breakers too. So it's more interesting. I think Fire King cards are also cool because again, it's not just hand trap starter because that deck is a lot of 2 card combinations when you take out the Snake Eye cards. So do I think there are other hits that could have been done other than the original to keep Fire King and Wraith alive while Snake Eye died? Yes. You could hit Snake Eye Ash and Popular directly. Um, but I think the biggest thing after this last ban list was that I want Snake Eyes gone, and so I'm not going to complain too much about the other damage that was caused by this ban list. The main priority was Snake Eyes is gone. We have a new format, and I'm overall happy with that.
So obviously we're still a little bit new into this format, but so far are you feeling like this format's healthier than the previous format?
Yes, I think the big thing is that you have more interesting game patterns. In the sense that if you look at Snake Eyes, they go starter, you hand trap, and there's not much decision making there. It's just they always start with their start, and you always hand trap, and you're not really ever holding it unless you're trying to layer with nib, but even that specific. Where if you look at Raizeol and Malice immediately, a lot of times you are already allowing them to make half boards. Well, first of all, breakers are just fine with them if you want to play breakers, so you can
Hmm.
already choose to have more things than just hand traps, which I think breakers were really never really that good versus Snake Eyes unless you're exactly Despia. Um, so overall, your options for deck choices and deck building is already better. But even gameplay wise, it's like if I go normal summon Raizel Ice, my opponent can hand trap that, but a lot of times it's just going to hold for the duo. And so what this means is that now I get to play because I get to duo and they get a hand trap it, and then I can choose, okay, whether I want to make just a dead with my remaining bodies, or I can just play for follow up. And so it's already a meaningful decision. If I make it dead, well, now I have a half board that's breakable, but that's my opponent play. I'm also playing. And so this leads to a lot more interesting game patterns. And I think Malice is somewhat similar. Like it plays through traditional hand traps pretty well, but it has just other generic cards that are fine into it. Like Bell is very good into it. Lance is obviously kind of a bit toxic, but Bell's a card that trades fine. Or if you have something like Ash or Ogre, it trades fine in the sense that you can just hold it for your turn and you let your phone combo, and now you're just trying to crack boards. So I really think it's significantly better format because you actually have these people make boards and people break boards, and that's what I think is interesting with the game, as opposed to the Snake board, which is not getting broken as much as I would have liked it to.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's something that we were even discussing within our own team, is that with the permanent fall of Snake Eyes now, it seems like board breakers are actually able to return to the game. And board breakers aren't that bad into Raizeol or Malice. I found a lot of success with like using Harpy's Feather Duster to clear out like half the interaction that Raizeol ends on. is able to just help you push through their board a lot. And even though Malice ends with the spell trap negate, a lot of the time you're able to bait that out either using your board breaker or using something else, and then your board breaker is just able to resolve.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing is you can just choose how you want to approach, which I think is a good thing. If you want to go a board breaker approach, then you can. Like it's by all means viable. And if you want to go hand traps, still you can choose to play hand traps. And so you just want the choice there. And
Mm-hmm.
also like different decks want to do different things. Like some decks are a lot of gas and want to play breakers and not play hand trap boards, and they're able to do that now. So you have a bit more option deck choices as well.
Right. And then one last thing before we move away from the Snake Eyes talk. Do you feel like the lack of Snake Eyes representation at this past YCS was due to just a decline in the power of the deck in relation to the new decks coming out? Or do you think it was just more new toy syndrome?
A bit of both, I would say. I think that one is awfully positioned as well. Like I think hand traps are always the way to try and tackle Snake Eye, and Snake Eye is just a worse hand trap deck than Raizeol. And so it's like, why am I choosing to play Snake Eye when I can play Raizeol? And it's just a sense of I go start with Snake Eye, they hand trap. I go Witch now as an extender. It's like
Mhm,
when I've used 3 cards, you have another hand trap. I'm passing essentially nothing. When I'm playing Raizeol, I go starter, they go hand trap, I go another starter. Well, now they need a hand trap for that. Plus, they still need hand trap for the duel. So it's just card efficiency wise, it's just bad in hand trap formats. Like it was kind of the best 1 card engine deck, but it wasn't
mhm,
that because it was good at hand traps. It was just we're good into hand traps. It was just like that because when it resolved, it was the best. So I think it had a bad matchup spread was kind of the biggest thing. And then new choice syndrome, obviously. And I think a lot of people that are the better players who are playing Snake Eye also moved away from the deck. And so it's like
mhm,
people who are staying on it. Let's say there wasn't anyone good on it. Not to insult them, but you have less of the good players that you could bet on topping playing the deck, so it's going to have less and worse turnout overall. I think if we had that format, Anaheim format, last longer, would Snake Eye still be able to top? 100%. It'd be top 3 decks still. I think it would probably be better than Malice, maybe around there. Do I think it'd be as Raizeol? Have to see. Like I said, I think it's just a matchup thing, but I think that deck will also been able to innovate a bit more as well. So
all right. And good timing with this one, because just this morning I was scrolling through YouTube and saw that Pack put out a video saying that Malice is the best deck, whether he's doing that for clicks or because he actually believes it. I'll let the viewers decide. But for you specifically, between Malice and Raizeol, which do you feel is better?
I think Raizel's better. It's actually funny. I played Pack round 1 of the YCS. Amazing round 1 I had to play against. I unfortunately came away with a win there. But I think the issue with Malice is that it just does horribly into dead. Like I think Malice into the rest of the field is actually probably a bit better than Raizel. Like I think it deals with the Fiend cards a little bit better. I think it just plays through conventional hand traps a little bit better than Raizel, at least in terms of like sometimes Malice would just play through 4 Veils and Imperms.
Yep.
Where Raizel's they're always at some point going to trade. But I think that's just such a massive problem. Like you can have solutions to dead in the form of engage into Widow or Slayer where you want, but when you're still trying to rely on non-engine as opposed to just having your engine trade well into their engine, it's just such an uphill battle. So I think like I said, just based on matchups, Malice is worse. I also think the new support it gets in the next few sets is worse than the ones we have for Raizel. That being said, I don't think it's a bad deck. It's still the second best deck, but I do think there's a little bit of a separation that Raizel should be a little bit better. Be the tier 1 deck while Malice is the tier 1.5 deck.
Um, do you think that once we get Suda, the meta is going to change in a meaningful way?
I think the one big thing is that you'll have the top decks will stay the same. Like Razor will get a fair bit better with the Twins card. Mouse is going to stay about the same. But the big thing is, I think if you will get a bit more of a fill in of these rogue decks we lost, like the original ban actually hit a fair bit of the tier 2 options. Like hit Rescue Ace, it hit, well, I guess it Fire King, which wasn't tier 2, but it was, tier 2 earlier when the first wave of Snake Eyes dominance was. And then Tepe got hit, Ubel got hit. So a lot of these kind of other strategies that were the, the best decks, like the second best decks for Anaheim, right behind Raizeol and Malice. Those got hit, and I think we'll fill up those spots a bit. You'll have more of these contenders that will get 1 or 2 tops here. Like the 10 cards are okay. They'll get some regional tops. The Christian cards are okay. They'll appear. The White Forest cards are good. I think they'll pop up, and you'll have a deck at some level. I don't know what it'll look like, but will function. Will these all be worse than the best two decks? Yes, but you'll have a bit more variation in that kind of second tier category. I think that's a good thing, but we shouldn't expect a massive shakeup in terms of what the best decks are and what you'll be playing most at the event.
All right. So since we've established that Raizeol is likely to be the best deck for a good while going forward, what do you feel is the best Raizeol variant?
I think both of them are good. I personally prefer pure. I just a lot of people will disagree with that, and I think it's just a playstyle thing. A lot of people want the kind of extra ceiling that the Fiendsmith cards give, but I don't like the clunkiness of hands in the form of drawing Whack-A-Mole with Ice is annoying. Larry's not a great draw. The trap's obviously not a great draw, and so you do have a higher ceiling. Your end boards can do your end boards more. Your one card combos do a bit more, but you do have a bit more clunkiness. I also think that the trap is extremely good into the Fiendsmith trap is extremely good into Raizeol, and so in a mirror match is also somewhat favored. But that being said, you sit down versus Malice and they shift at you, and now you have Fiendsmith cards in your hand instead of just generic tech cards, and it feels worse. So I think generally that the way I look at it, that Fiendsmith cards have advantage over Raizeol. Raizeol has advantage over Malice cards, and Malice cards have advantage over Fiendsmith cards to some degree. Um, it's not just set in stone, but they're also somewhat close. And while I expect the Fiendsmith version of Raizeol to be more popular and see a bit more success going forward, and as the format develops, I think that the variants are still close enough that you can play whatever you want with success.
All right. Let's go on ahead and talk about some generic things. Uh, Now, these cards were very controversial when they were first revealed, and even right now. What are your thoughts on the Mulcharmies?
Alone. I think it's great for the game. So I think there was a bit of a knee jerk reaction because it's like, oh, these cards are maxi light, and it's like, well, the thing I was saying to locals and to everyone is like, if Mulcharmies are maxi, then Upstarts are Pogri. Like they are completely different scales of power level, and that's not to say that they're bad. Upstart is a good card, um, but it's not Pogri. And similar with the Mulcharmies, this card is not a maxi. Maxi creates a lot of uninteresting game states where you can't even make any form of half boards. There's not any decision making. It's a lot of times you're just passing, or your half boards are like very fake with how many draws you're giving them. But the Mulcharmies don't do that. It's that I'm going to Mulcharmy you, and a lot of the time, if you're playing one of the higher tier decks, you have a backup plan, and you can go to your backup plan, and you can choose when to commit. And so, even just going first, getting Mulcharmy, you have a lot of decisions, and it doesn't feel as punishing when you want to play. And I think it's a good thing because you're creating different games. I think that's what we want. We don't want every game to just feel the exact same, which is one of my complaints with the Snake Eye format.
Mhm.
When you have Charmies, it's like they create different games. Some games you won't get Charmies and you get a combo, try through hand traps, or they get play breakers. And another games you're going to get Charming, and you have to get into this weaker board and play for fall. And I think that's fine. And I think that the other thing is weird to say the power level of the decks is the strength of these decks out right now isn't so much the end board and the raw power of them. It's more just
Mhm.
the resilience of them, like how much fall you can get for free, how much they will play through like these soft interruptions and get to the point where they have follow up and they have half board well. And so when you get Charming and forced to pass, you don't just get blown out of the water, um, which is nice. And the other thing is good with these is that I think that we saw a little bit of Snake Eye form was a bit dangerous back then, is you can just tell people to go first, and so it's somewhat of a deterrence for people to side and six chummies.
Mhm.
I know some heavy combo decks are doing that. They say, okay, you go first, now you six chummies and they're dead. And again, that's like leading to interesting strategizing because now it's not just, oh, I get max seed, I pass. It's no, you get go first, I can create a new type of game where it's now you have these go second cards in your deck and you decide what you want to do with them while I'm the one you thought you were going first going second. And I think just because of how many different types of game states you have, all the game states you have are healthy. They lead to actual games. I think they're very healthy cards. And you even see decks not play them. Like a lot of the decks
Mhm.
from Anaheim weren't on six of them because they just said, hey, like I don't think it's interesting with my deck well. I don't want to main them because if I'm trying to hand trap my opponent, I don't need two on my main. I don't need it anywhere. I don't want to play Perulia because I think that cards just do go bad and play other cards. And I think that when people are cutting these cards and not deciding to play them in every single deck, I think that's a sign that they're healthy and there's decisions to be made.
All right. Now, between the two that we currently have in TCG, which one do you think is the best for the current format?
I think it just depends on what you're trying to do with your deck and what that role is trying to fill. Which again is why the reason I consider them healthy because it's not a power level thing. It's you're looking at the strength of them and trying to figure out what is this interest from a deck. And so if you're playing a hand trap deck where you're trying to, you're playing something like Cash Fiendsmith, the Musket Fiendsmith deck, where you just have layers and layers of hand traps, and your goal is to really slow down your opponent that way. I don't want to play Fua because my opponent's not going to be doing these massive combos. I'm going to Perulia them. I'm going to hand trap them a bit. They're going to force me more draws, and now we're playing this value game with my hand traps, and I'm going to be in a better position that way. If you're playing a deck with less of these tech spots and not trying to play these hand boards, then Fua is better because it's kind of Fua. You're not going to full combo me. You're going to stop there, and I'm going to use my other tech cards in the form of pseudo breakers like the striker cards, cash cards, or just you know I get turned with my Raizeol cards and I get to play. And it's not me trying to hand trap you. It's that I just want that pseudo turn skip where you're making that breakable board and then I break it. So it really is just a deck dependent thing. And I have lists for different decks that have Pru in it and the other one has Fu in it. And there's some have both, some have neither. It's just based on what other tech cards you want to do and what you're trying to do with that spot in your deck.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about nor heard it before, that debating on which one and whether or not you should play them at all, depending upon whether you want your opponent to full combo or not, is definitely something good to consider when deck building that I don't think a lot of people have considered either.
I think a lot of people talk about synergizing between like engine pieces, which also
Hmm.
makes sense. But you probably spend most of the time doing figure out combos and whatnot. But you want to think a lot about the synergy between your tech cards and how they interact. And you want your tech cards to be doing a similar thing. And I think that's one thing I do as well. Is it's why I end up having some weird lists or putting together tech cards because I think that they synergize really well. Like for example, the last deck I played at YCS Anaheim, I made Fuas, which I think was fine. I don't think it's that spice or anything. But I also decided main strikes in the main deck, and I decided basically that if I'm going to have this Fu on my deck that is a heavy go second card that is going to turn skip in a lot of scenarios, not true turn skip, but will let me set up my own board. Then having a card like Strike in the main will be reasonable because I'm going to be going second and being able to set a Solemn Strike because I flew with them a fair bit of the time. And so this Solemn Strike that's usually just a go second card or go first card turned into a fine go second cards due to the opportunities that the Fua allowed me to put myself in. And if I wasn't meaning Fua, then I wouldn't mean Strike. If I was coming to Fua for something like Nib,
Hmm.
then the Strikes also wouldn't be there because now I'm not going to get that scenario where I have this one card giving me a turn to set the strike as much. So you really do need to think about those strategies and how your tech cards are interacting with each other.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that most people had put into their brain at least a little bit, but not, or might not have thought fully about during cash format, with not running Nibiru or like Bestials, even if they were good in the format, because they're not good for the deck. Um, but let's go into something that gets brought up anytime these cards circle back into the format. Should T-Barrier and Lancia be banned?
Sure. I mean, it's they're really going to be
Surprisingly.
floodgates. Yeah, they're really going to be floodgates. I'm not going to defend them much.
Yep.
I'll defend Droll a little bit because I think that card is witch hunted a little bit in the sense that that card has a lot of problems that are exploited. Um, where people, I feel like every format, people come in and go Droll's insane, and then it just ends up being a hand drop format where you're playing for value and Droll's bad. Um, but the other two is just like they're very specific cards that are meant for specific decks, and when you're turn skipping like that, it's just like, why do we have these types of cards in this game? I think the reaction is a little bit overblown in the sense that there are a lot of games that you have the ability to win through Lancia or to win through D Barrier just
Hmm.
by your own tech cards. Like, we're not playing 30 card engine decks with 10 tech spots where if you open 5 engine cards and they flip one of these cards, you lose the game. You have your own tech cards to trade back, and you can do some creative things. But, the fact that they're not super toxic does not mean I support this kind of design, and I'll be happy if they go away.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially with something like Droll. Like, I really hate Droll. It should probably be banned. But man, when I sit across from like Dark World or something stupid, I could not be happier when I see that card in my hand. Like, there's just some decks that make it necessary, and whether we should even have those decks is a discussion for another time, but sometimes you
I
just
think
need to see them.
I think the Mulcharmies kind of do a much healthier job than those cards
Hmm.
because they at least give your opponent some decisions. And you can say that, okay, well, it's illusion of decision making because it's like, okay, if I'm playing Salamangreat Great and I get forward, like, how many decisions do I really have? But at least here it's that they're generally not as problematic into most of the decks. Like, most decks will have backup plans, and they're only good going second. And so where Lancia and Droll and DB are just creating these toxic games going both ways, the Fuos are creating slightly less toxic games in a lot of cases, and even when they're creating these super toxic games, because it's one of those decks that just like hard loses to it, at least it's only you know half the time, a third of the time, because it's not going to be in people's main decks. It's not going to be when they're going for having these cards as well.
Oh yeah. Going on to the next one. Konami's been pretty good about consistently removing banned cards from the lists, either every list or every couple of lists. So, what banned cards do you think we could get back, and which ones would you want back?
I play Master Duel a lot. I really like the ban list there. And I think that it means just shuffling things a bit. So I think Sprite Elf is a card that can come back. That being said, I don't think it should coexist with Toad. I think that kind of synergy is too bad, or too toxic. And I think Toad's a card that in its own right can get banned. And so seeing that swap wouldn't be something I dislike. Especially because since I think Toad is one of the more toxic part of the Mermaid deck, which is a deck I actually like. It's very interesting. But Toad's kind of what pushes over the edge when they're going first. So if you have that swap where you get rid of Toad and you bring back Elf, I think that'd be something I'm a big fan of. It helps with a grind game as a card is very good as opposed to this generic Omni. Other card could be Verte, because we've gone past the point where Verte is a viable black plan when you're just playing 2, 3 bricks in your deck.
Mhm.
And I think the times it does come up, it's fine. I think on Master Duel you see it, but it's not this overwhelming card that it's like, oh my goodness, this is complete nonsense. Like, why is this card so bad? It's maybe Sanctifier needs to go before that happens. But again, I think that it's not been power crept, but has been at least humbled a bit in terms of it being the complete problem it was. And I think the other cards can take some of the blame for it as well now.
Mhm. What do you think about Masterpiece since you're playing on Master Duel? Think he should come back or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see much. I think I play against him once or twice,
Mhm.
but the problem with Drew Draco is always the floodgates.
Yep.
But I don't think that giving the deck more engine is particularly a bad thing. Like, yes, it elevates the deck, but I think that's Masterpiece is the more interesting part of the deck.
Mhm.
Especially like I think that type of card design is fine nowadays. Like we have Noir. Like look at Noir
Yeah.
compared to Masterpiece. Like I'm gonna draw 4 cards in my standby phase, and I have 3 shuffles, and it's unaffected right now. Like with Noir existing, I don't think Masterpiece is a problem at all.
Yeah. Plus, we've gotten rid of a lot of the problematic floodgates that they'd run and just sit on, either banning them or at least putting them to one on the list. Like,
And like I
I
think
think it.
Trudeau's a deck with an interesting playstyle. It's just the
Mhm.
floodgates are the problem.
Yeah, like if it came back right now, the most problematic floodgate that is on the list would probably be something like Power Sync Stone, and even that one's fairly manageable.
Yeah,
Let's
and
see.
breakers have just gone better as well. So
Mhm. Um, Now reversing it, which cards in the current format do you think that should probably get put on the next list, if you have any?
I mean, I think lingering fight's always a consideration. Like, I will not complain if D-Bear is gone. I don't think that
Mhm.
card leads to interesting games. Like, I don't think it's ruining the format. I don't think it's like, oh my god, this is unplayable. But why do we have cards like this that aren't ever doing anything fun or healthy? Similar with Lancia, I think Droll's fine. Chummies are fine. Sure, there's another card that could get hit, but again, it's is it healthy? No. Is it completely ruining the game? No. Depends who you're asking. Depending on what deck we're playing. But even if you're just hitting it down to a lower number, I won't complain about that. Other cards I think that Murmill's kind of a new deck. I really just like just these go first and auto win types of decks. I think engine heavy decks are fine. So if you hit Toad or Glacier, just take a little bit off the top off Murmill, making the board a bit more breakable, especially in the form of like Toad or Glacier, where you're not removing their ability to go second at all. It's just we don't want to have this die roll kind of deck. Also, Protos can go.
Mhm.
Like I think the Ritual Beast cards are cool. I think that they play through hand trips well, and they do interesting things. The engine's actually pretty good going second.
Mhm.
But then why do we have this floodgate that just I can't interact with? So
Yep.
similar complaints I think that most people have, where it's just when you can't interact, it's not fun.
Yeah, we have a guy who used to play Ritual Beast on our team, and we keep on joking with him because every single Mulcharmy that they reveal just destroys the deck.
Yeah, and like it's unfortunate because the deck is cool, but it's Protoss is just a completely anti-fun card. We
Yeah.
can't even try anything interesting. It's just oh they combo. Oh, I'm not getting very far now.
Yep. Um, Now, one of the most controversial cards of the modern era, so many people have called for its ban. So many should say that it's unlimited. Some want limited. Some say semi's fine. What are your thoughts on D shifter?
I mean, I mentioned that slightly just now. It's the same as all these other cards. Um, it's not a healthy card, and so if it's at 0, I will not complain. Do I think that it is absolutely ruining the game right now? No. Do I think it will absolutely ruin the game at 2 or 1 either? No. And so it's just one of these things where it's toxic. I don't really see why we have it around. Um,
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's not quite completely warping things. And I think that people overestimate, like, they just draw the card and win. It's not really that simple, especially with Malice being the deck now that plays it. Like, the Malice deck actually gets hindered a fair bit by Shifter. As weird as to say, like, you're not setting up full boards, you're setting up 2 interruptions under it, plus Follow-up. So there are still things you can do. And that's not me defending the card, it's more just,
Mhm.
you know, deciding not to go completely pitchforks out with Shifter. I'd be happy if it gets hit to any level. Less is better, but I'm not going to lose my mind over its existence.
All right. Konami's been doing a pretty good job lately with updating some of the old and forgotten archetypes. Which ones would you like to see get new support?
Well, anyone who follows me, they shouldn't be surprised I want more Vanquish Soul cards. Mainly, I just want consistency. I don't need power level. Just give me more ways of searching. But I think overall that I want decks that are interesting to play style and they feel different to play. And I think that a lot of the decks of recent years have felt very interesting and very unique. Like it doesn't feel, if you look back to like the beginning of COVID, 2020, where it's just Adamantipator and I'll just Synchro. It's like everyone's doing the exact same thing, like
Hmm.
with the extra deck cards. So those are interesting. So you want decks to feel unique. Phoenix's cards feel unique. The Vanquish Soul, obviously unique deck like Pearly. A lot of the airships we had in the last 2 years have been unique. And so any of those types of decks, I think, are good to get more support. Uh, Ones that come to mind would be like something like Poltergeist. I think that we don't have enough trap decks that aren't just set 5, that aren't just true Floodgates. Lab is a deck that is a trap deck, but it is somewhat combo oriented. Like once your engine gets going, you were doing a lot of actions on both players' turns. And I know Poltergeist got new support before, but it just felt too combo oriented, where it's just like you're just trying to make it end board without really playing the strength of the deck. So I can see a bit more of a trap supported Poltergeist support, as opposed to the combo we got. Another archetype of mine seeing support is Flu. Like everyone hates this deck, but the problems with Flu are not the engine cards. It's Featherstorm, Shifter,
Hmm.
Barrier Statue, but the actual playstyle of the deck's cool. Like summoning Empen and having A with Book of Moon, then
Hmm.
having these little birds as a grind game, I think is very interesting. And I think a lot of people lose the Flu because they don't understand how to interact with it correctly.
Hmm.
Because the games where they're not drawing their blowouts and you're losing, like a lot of times there are interaction points. And so I think that a deck like that is something else I support. Any of these decks that have unique playstyles and feel different to play, I really like.
Yeah, I know a couple members of our team really love Flu. As much as the other half of the team absolutely hates it, but
Yeah, yeah.
definitely one of the more controversial decks. But looking back on it, it's kind of nice. But
It's just one, like I said, it's one of those decks that gets clumped in with all the degenerate cards it plays.
mhm.
And if we get rid of all those degenerate cards, and you have other, if we ever give you another tribute summon monster, another little bird, it's like, are people really gonna freak out about that? Like, if you can guarantee I don't get shifted with Featherstorm, but you get like some other bird that does something where it's like, I
Yeah.
don't know, you gotta shuffle your hand into the deck and you redraw that many cards in the main phase just as a disruption. Like, would that be a problem? Like, no. I mean, I guess you can get drolled there, but ignoring the droll again is like, interesting interactions I think are fine. And I think
Mhm.
Flu does that well.
Oh yeah. Um, let's see here. Um, I think that's just about all of the questions. So I'll leave you with one last one. What's your most memorable moment from your time in the game so far?
I think it just had to be YCS Indie, which is the second YCS I won. I won the first one with Exorcister, and I think that was a bit unfortunate. Like I got lucky to some degree, not in the sense of like I didn't like I played poorly or my list was bad. I think I had good theory going into that event with Exorcister, whether people want to agree with it or not. I think my technical play of that event was fine, but it didn't feel like I was. If I was going to re-run that event 100 times, like would I win again? Maybe once. It's not something I would like look at as standout to win that event.
Mhm.
Where race I felt a bit more dominant with. I think I played just really, really well over the course of the entire weekend. Just gameplay wise, it was just a lot of interesting games that I just, games like I was mentioning earlier at the beginning when we started talking about like how do you improve. It's just games that shouldn't be winnable, and I managed to squeeze one out somehow. And I felt that wall of confidence. I'm really happy with my gameplay leading from that event, and I was a little happy because I spent a lot of time on that deck, and it wasn't a deck I particularly picked up fast at all. It was a deck
Mhm.
that I found a lot of difficulty with because I like lower action mid range decks, and that was a deck that was very engine heavy. And so there's a lot of times where I'm trying to play through boards with engine. It's not always easy. And I think that with the amount of time I put in, I was very happy with that result. It was one of the times where I actually look back and think, okay, this is, at that moment, I was one of the best players in the game. I can't say that about all the points and all the matters, but that one I think that I can brag about and not feel too bad about.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We hope to have you on again at some point.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'm just to show my YouTube quickly.
Oh yeah, feel free.
So Santoli Yu-Gi-Oh! I post somewhat frequently. Basically, whenever I get an interesting deck or having any interesting ideas, I post on there. So if you guys are interested in those types of things, feel free to check it out. It is at least I try to be a little bit different in terms of just regurgitating standard lists. So
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Anyone else you want to shout out while you're here?
shout out to Tire Council Rubina, which is my test group. Not really official team; it's just local guys, but I appreciate them having to put up with all my complete nonsense ideas that they have to sit through, like the weeks of exorcist testing. But can do without them, and then everyone at locals I play with. It makes this game enjoyable.
All right. Well, I'll let you go. And
Thank you.
thank you all for watching and have a good night.